Hey there, and welcome to the Divorce Planner Podcast. I'm divorce prep coach Alex Beatty. If you suspect your spouse might be hiding money during divorce, or you're in a situation where they control all the finances, this conversation is tailor-made for you. Today, I'm talking to forensic accountant Jennica Moore, who specializes in uncovering hidden assets and financial fraud in divorce cases. We cover everything from red flags to watch out for, what information you can legally access if your spouse controls the finances, the actual legal consequences when someone gets caught hiding assets, and the first steps to take if you suspect hidden money. If you're dealing with a spouse who owns a business, is financially controlling, or just have a gut feeling something isn't right with the finances, this conversation will help you understand your options and how to uncover hidden assets. Let's dive in. Hi, Jennica. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today to kind of get into, I would say, forensic accounting 101 as it pertains to divorce. Now, you are somebody who I've talked to before in the past. I'm so glad to have you on. This is the first time I've tackled it on the podcast. And I just really want to be able to cover some kind of generalized areas to really help people understand what it is you do, how it is you could potentially help them, and help them avoid some mistakes they might be making or maybe their spouse is making. So with that, I'm just going to kind of jump in. So let's start with the most basic question, right? What is a forensic accountant and what do they do during a divorce?
Well, that's definitely the million-dollar question. I'm asked that all the time. And the simplest answer is forensic means pertaining to the law. So if it has to do with a legal case, and what we're talking about today, a divorce case, we are called in to help people settle their financial disputes. So it's an accountant. Usually we have accounting training. So for me, I've worked as a CFO, director of finance. I have a lot of corporate and public accounting experience that you start and you get your basic accounting skills. And then you are more of an investigator and you put puzzles together. And so if it has to do with a legal case and a dispute, so in a divorce case, a lot of times they're fighting over money, they'll hire us to come in and look at the financial statements and look at, if they have a business, their financial statements, look at their personal net worth and see what their assets are, because you don't know how to split the assets if you don't know what they are. So that's a broad overview of what a forensic accountant is. It just means if there's a legal dispute and it's an accountant that specializes in this area of investigation.
I love that you actually covered a lot of different areas, specifically that you can work with people's personal finances or business assets as well, which is an important distinction given I have a lot of clients that go through a divorce that either they own a business, the person I'm working with, or their soon-to-be ex, their spouse owns a business. So that can feel a little sticky. They're not sure of, especially we're going to get into it in a little bit of how money can be hidden. But I guess my next question would be, is a forensic accountant somebody who primarily works in high net worth divorces, or do you work with all socioeconomic levels?
Definitely all areas. It doesn't have to be a high net worth divorce. Our services are just like any other type of professional services. They're not inexpensive. So I always tell clients, you don't want to spend dollars chasing nickels. And so I look at each case individually. Certainly the high net worth divorce cases, there's a lot more assets to value. There's a lot more work that can be done. But you may have someone who had a retirement plan prior to marriage and they were married for 10 years, and each state has their own set of family laws. And in Georgia, for separate property, we do tracing. Anything they had prior to marriage is separate property as long as it wasn't commingled and transmuted. And they may hire us to do a simple tracing to look at, okay, what did they have before in their retirement plan? What did they contribute during the marriage? Because that'll be marital portion. What were the gains on the marital portion versus the separate portion? And that's a quick analysis that is rather affordable. And instead of, let's say you've got a $300,000 retirement plan, instead of just splitting it 50-50, you may hire us to come in to do a tracing because you had that prior to marriage, and it may be split 75 to 25 and to 25 your favor. So you may maintain your separate property. So it may be worth it. So it doesn't have to be a high net worth divorce, even though the high net worth divorces a lot of times will have situations where they need us for sure.
It's so interesting because the example that you brought up, I think is great. I think there are a lot of instances where people who have been, married for a really long time, decades even, if they're getting to a point where they're divorcing and they're preparing all of their statements and documents and trying to trace back what is what, sometimes, I've come up against hurdles with clients where they're like, I had this, retirement account from a job that I had that was prior to my marriage, maybe overlapped by a year. And then but I can't even find the paperwork for it. Is that like part of the detective work that you do?
It is. We'll do a document request form. So the client will know exactly what to request from their employer, whether it's a prior employer, it's a current employer. But if they had a retirement plan, it was just sitting there and they haven't added to it, say it was a prior company that they worked for and they didn't add to it, and that's just going to be separate. If they've added to it during the marriage, part of that would be marital, part of it would be separate. And we definitely help the client with the document request so that they'll know what to get.
Okay, that is fantastic because that's part of the biggest hassle, right, of collecting, especially when you're talking about financial institutions that might have existed 20, 25 years ago, but they don't now. So it's like most people have no idea how to track down the information they need when they're going through a divorce. I will say, getting ready for this conversation, I let my social media followers kind of know that I was going to talk to a forensic accountant. And there's one thing that comes up time and time again. Well, actually two. And this is the first. That was the most popular thing that people really wanted covered. And that is a lot of people have suspicions about the other spouse hiding assets, but they're not sure if it's worth engaging a forensic accountant or if they're being paranoid or, if they're caught up in the whole process. Based on that, like, what are some things that you can gather if you have some suspicions about something? And what are some like red flags to look for as opposed to just your intuition?
Always trust your gut. And if it seems like it's off, a lot of times it is. If you have access to the accounts, if they're in your name, you can access them without any type of discovery request. You just go to the bank and request the statements, or you can do it online. And so that would be step one. Figure out if the account's in your name, then go ahead and get the statements. Start gathering all the documents. Because I know a lot of times people going through a divorce, they're blindsided and they don't know what they have. And so start with your bank statements and look at the transfers in and out. Look for account numbers that you're not sure, that you don't recognize, and then just start gathering a list of the different accounts so you can see transfers to, transfers from. The bank statements tell the whole story. As far as like hiding, I've seen couples with cash-based businesses where they don't put the money into the account. If it doesn't go into an account, there's nothing that we can do. If it lands somewhere, we can trace it, we can find it. But if it doesn't go into an account, there's no way to know. So the best advice would be, we offer free case consultations. We never take a case where we don't feel like it would be worth it. I turn people down all the time and say, listen, I just don't think it would be worth the money to try to, we're not miracle workers. We can't, if it's not in the bank statements, if it's just cash and they're using it, we can do like a lifestyle analysis.
Mm-hmm.
We can do property searches to see if they own property. So that would tell like how much they paid for the property. We can do asset analysis if they've got a car that they spent a bunch of money on, but we look at tax returns. If they filed jointly, get a copy of your tax return if you don't have a copy of your tax return. Because that really tells a lot. It tells if you've got interest coming in, which means that there's an account somewhere where you're earning interest on it. If you've got dividends, if you've got capital gains. So get the tax returns, get the bank statements, and use your planner to start gathering all the documents.
We'll be back after a quick break. Feeling overwhelmed about the possibility of a divorce and not sure where to start? Book a free 15-minute strategy call with me. During our time, we'll talk about where you are in the process and what next steps could be. To schedule your call and learn more about my coaching program, head over to www.thedivorceplanner.net/coaching. Let's get back to today's episode. It's so helpful to get all this active things that people can do and to start to empower them. And I think I want to kind of like switch into the second most popular thing that people will always ask me, which is like what to do if your spouse controls all the finances, because it's both people's responsibility to start gathering all their statements and documents, because those are going to be handed in by both parties during the financial discovery period. And I've worked with people where we'll go through, because I'm telling them, you need the last 12 months of bank statements and we're going to look through them, and highlighting things that are suspicious, because that's what you're going to make a list of, going back to what you said, like document what you find and then bring it up with your attorney. I don't know where this is from. That's the earliest breadcrumbs. Between that and you, of course, talked about the best treasure map, which is tax returns. If you and your spouse are filing jointly, you can request copies from the IRS. And it's not going to ding a spouse to tip them off if this is something that you're doing kind of preemptively to get your, ducks in a row as you're considering or preparing for the process. But switching gears to that other most requested, question, which is, what if your spouse controls the finances? People are always, by the way, feeling a lot of shame about that, but I try to remind everybody, we all can't do every role when we're in a marriage. You're supposed to be handing off things, delegating, and each person kind of covering different bases. Are there ways to access account and financial information without your spouse knowing if you're kind of denied a lot of information from that spouse about your financial realities?
So a couple of things there. Just to be clear, when you request a copy of your tax return from the IRS, you have to access their online database, and they're probably going to send you a letter in the mail. So if you don't check the mail, your spouse may see that. That's just a little tip, because the IRS, they're really vigilant about fraud. And they're going to send you a letter in the mail probably, and it's going to say, you requested a copy of your tax. If this wasn't you, please let us know. And so I think that's important to know. And then as far as accessing the documents, if it's in your name, just contact the bank. If your husband or wife doesn't allow you to have access to it, if it's just in their name, there's nothing that you can do until you get an attorney. And once you go through the divorce process, they have to provide a list of all of their assets and all of their liabilities. They're required to do that. And if they don't do that, the judge is not going to be very happy about that. They're going to get some reprimands from the judge if they're trying to hide assets. It never works out well. But get a really good family law attorney that preferably specializes in family law, doesn't just dabble in it and do a bunch of other stuff. So get a really good family law attorney. Talk to a couple different ones to see. A lot of people think, okay, I'm going through this divorce. I want to fight. I want a bulldog attorney. But if you have children, you don't necessarily want a bulldog family law attorney. You don't want someone who is just going to fight to the death. You want, in my opinion, a more collaborative attorney who is knowledgeable, but will also help you treat this like a business breakup instead of an emotional, I got to just win at all cost. So interview a couple of attorneys, but they can help you get the documents and there is no shame in it. There's always one spouse, in my experience, that handles most of the finances. And a lot of times both spouses are involved and they know everything that's going on, but one person is the primary caretaker of the finances. And there's no shame in being a person that doesn't know anything about the finances.
I feel like we can't say that enough, right? There's just, when it comes to money, money equals feelings. Money's very triggering. And whether it's an innocent kind of everybody has split up who's covering what, or if there has been intentional keeping one spouse away from financial information for whatever reason, power dynamic. I've worked with clients who are in financially abusive situations. It runs the gamut, but there's no
Yeah.
shame in any of it. And I want to kind of jump in and go back. You had given that great piece of advice. Once you request something from any institution, but
Mhm.
especially the IRS, please keep your eyes open for something delivered in the mail. And something else that's, a great little detective tool, which is the United States Post Office, actually also offers informed delivery.
Yes.
You can sign up
Mhm.
and it sends you a picture of every piece of mail that is going to be delivered. So, pro tip number 2.
No, that's great, especially if, a lot of statements are online now, so a lot of it doesn't come through the mail. But if you are suspecting that your spouse is hiding something from you, getting that delivery through the post office is great because they can't beat you home and check the mail. That's a really good tip.
It's such a great one. And I also, want to remind people, yes, a lot of banking is done online these days. However, more often than not, if you're getting solicited from financial institutions, you're on their marketing lists if you
Hmm.
have an account there. So it's another way to kind of keep track of, oh, I noticed a lot of Chase stuff is coming to the house, but I don't know that we have a Chase account. Put it on that list of things you're unsure about. So
Yeah.
when you have that financial discovery, you can check off the list or say, hey, we get a lot of Chase. Is there anything missing here? And then also, just going back to what you said, you're 100% right when it comes to selecting whoever the legal professional is that is going to be representing you, whether that is in a consultation kind of position or if it is in a mediation position or a litigation position. And we're always trying to avoid that litigation.
Hmm.
Going into your consultations prepared is
Oh,
the name
yeah.
of the game. I'm always sitting on my soapbox talking about it. And I offer a free download, 24 questions to ask a divorce attorney or a mediator. It really is a good jumping off point to get you thinking about how to make the most of your time in those consultations. There's space to keep track of like all of the information those people share with you so you can kind of compare. But going in, as Jennica said, really prepared, then you're going to make the most of that consultation. And especially if it's free. Jennica, I can't believe you offer free consultations. People need to jump on that. I love it. I love it. We'll be right back after a quick break. Subscribe to the Divorce Planner's weekly newsletter and get divorce prep tips, financial planning tools, and expert insights delivered discreetly to your inbox. Sign up at www.thedivorceplanner.net. Let's get back to today's episode. I kind of want to circle back to, there is this loud voice out there, especially in the divorce, like social media sphere, about your spouse is hiding money from you. And so why don't we just tackle what are some of the most common ways people hide money during divorce? I can imagine you've probably seen some really creative hiding tactics, whether it's like cryptocurrency or stock options. If you have a corporate spouse, there's multi-tier of how they can get paid. Cash businesses, as you mentioned.
Hmm.
If you could just kind of dive in and let us know what those areas are, but also what's actually traceable and what are the limits of like what you can really uncover.
So, as far as cash based businesses go, if it never ends up, just like I said before, in a bank account somewhere or in some tangible asset that we can see, and they're just paying all of their bills in cash, there's nothing to trace. That would be hard to find. A lot of people with businesses will pay a lot of their personal expenses through their business and write them off on the tax return. We've done some analysis looking at, okay, this is what their tax return says, but this is what their bank account says. And we looked at, okay, they were buying all of their personal expenses out of their bank statement and they were trying to write it off on their tax return to pay less money on taxes, and then they're claiming in divorce court that they don't have any money for support. So you have to add back those personal expenses that they're paying through the business, and that counts as income for purposes of child support or spousal support. I had a client one time. It was funny because she was my client, and I was going through her marital balance sheet prep, and I found an account that wasn't on there. And I asked her about it, and she said that's her secret account. And it had $1 million in there. And at that time, I was kind of in a pickle because I was preparing the marital balance sheet and I had to put that on there now that I know about it. And, that's one thing I didn't really talk about at the beginning. Like, our role as a forensic accountant is not to be an advocate for the client. We're an advocate for our financial opinion. The attorney is an advocate for the client. So we're hired underneath the attorney for the client attorney privilege because we may discover something that is not favorable for the client. But, cryptocurrency, having a bunch of different bank accounts, moving money back and forth, not disclosing assets. Another one that probably is not talked about a lot is overpayment of taxes. Because they're expecting to get a divorce and they'll get a refund for that in a couple of years or whenever they try to say, okay, well, I paid extra. And so that's a unique way to do it. Paying ahead on any type of liability that they're going to get a refund for, like double paying bills and then if later asking for a refund. So I mean, people are pretty creative. Giving assets to family members for, just trying to give away stuff. Putting accounts in family members' names, slowly siphoning off money into secret accounts that their aunt is that person and on there. And so just looking at those account numbers, if it's not an account number that that's yours, put it on the list of red flags. What is this? We need to figure out where this money's going. Cashier's checks, taking out cash withdrawals, buying gold bars and putting it in safe deposit boxes. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people do.
Well, you actually brought up something really important that I just kind of want to put a fine point on, which is a forensic accountant is a neutral third party, right? So that is very similar, as Jennica said, to if you're hiring a mediator. A mediator doesn't work for one spouse or the other. They work on behalf of the divorce itself and getting you through all the points that need to be negotiated. And a forensic accountant is the same. They're not working for you or your spouse. They're working on behalf of the divorce. So they have to be transparent and have a neutral, no bias. They're in a neutral position, as opposed to, as you so astutely pointed out, if you're working with a family law attorney, that person that you're working with, either consulting or that you've hired them for full court press, they are looking through the lens of what is going to best benefit my client, what's in their best interest. So that just for a quick overview. You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, like what happens if somebody is caught hiding assets? Like, are there legal consequences? Does it impact a divorce settlement?
I mean, they're required to disclose their assets, and every case is different. Every judge is different. And that's why it's really important, in my opinion, to have a good attorney who will seek legal remedies wherever they're available. Again, each state is different. Family law courts are different. Even within the state, the different courts are different. So there are things that you can do to force you can subpoena banks and get them. Your attorney can subpoena the banks to get the documents, and they have to provide that information.
Yeah, otherwise it puts them in a really bad position.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put them in front of a judge, judges do not take kindly to people basically committing a crime. If you know at the top what your responsibility is and you don't fulfill it, that's not going to be a good sign for you during a divorce. So just to wrap up, I would love it. What are like the three biggest no-nos that you see people making during divorce that end up costing them, whether they're aware that it's going to do it, like that $1 million account, thank you very much, or otherwise?
Top no-nos would be not being completely honest with the forensic accountant. That happens more often than not. Be 100% honest about your finances and what's happened. Again, don't hire a bulldog attorney. Try to be more collaborative if possible. Mediations are great. We highly recommend them. We even attend those and help negotiate settlements. Forensic accountants do. So be honest. Don't hide any assets. Be transparent. And be prepared. I would think would be my top 3.
I mean, number 3 might be my favorite. I don't know. I mean, honesty is important. Preparation, honesty, and reach out to a forensic accountant if you have these suspicions. And, I was going to talk about, like, just to wrap it up, of like, what can somebody do today? And I think you really covered it so beautifully. If you have a suspicion, start writing things down. If you are noticing discrepancies between what is, deposited into your account and what's being transferred out, or large amounts of cash that are being withdrawn, highlight those things. You're going to want to talk about them and, make sure you're as prepared as possible before you even start the process, because then, ultimately you're going to drive the process, not only with what you know, with also what you don't know. And remember that every person that you're going to engage with during this divorce is a part of a larger team that's working with you.
Yeah.
Jennica Moore, you are so lovely to have spent this time with us today. Thank you so much for all of this wonderful information. And I hope to have you back again soon.
Yes. Sounds good, Alex. It's always great. Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you found it helpful. For more free resources, check out my blog at www.thedivorceplanner.net/blog. You'll find articles on how to emotionally and financially prepare for divorce, gain insights into the process from divorce experts, and empower yourself with tips and tools that make your divorce journey easier. And you can follow me on Instagram at the.divorce.planner, on Facebook at Divorce Prep, and on YouTube at The Divorce Planner for daily divorce prep tips and support. I'm Alex Beatty, and this has been the Divorce Planner Podcast. Until next time, remember, divorce is hard. Preparing for one doesn't have to be.